Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sandbox. Today's video is something special that I've been planning since October, November of last year, ranking every spoken ideal within the Stormlight archive. The Stormlight archive is my personal favorite fantasy series. To be fair, I've only dived into a handful of them, but nonetheless, it is an awesome series full of epic fantasy action and lore, an intricate world, and amazingly relatable and moving characters. Now, if you are not up to date with the series, which includes up to Rhythm of War and Dawnshard, the two new releases from 2020, I must advise that you pause this video, drop everything you're doing with your life, read this series, and then come back here because I assure you this series is worth it. Oh, you're back already? Well, that was quick. That was good, huh? All right, anyways. Now, at this point in the series, we've had a couple dozen of moments where a character says the next batch of words that are required for them to further progress as a Knights Radiant, and they thus get a surge of power and energy, which is followed by another epic moment of action or discovery. But there's often a lot more to it than that. For one, these words come with the cost of further binding yourself within this magical contract known as a Nahel bond, which is basically the symbiotic relationship between a being from the physical realm and a spren from the cognitive realm. These immortal words or ideals, as far as each book's narrative goes, are often a challenge for our characters because they must learn a lesson or come to terms with something that is very hard for them personally to do. So yes, while saying these words is something every Knights Radiant should want to do, it's often very hard for them to do because once you do say these words, there's no going back. So with all that said and out of the way, here are the components that I considered when ranking these ideals. Number one, are the words themselves inspiring? Do they elevate the text? Number two, how important and or exciting was it to finally see our character say these words given their unique arc within the story? Number three, how epic was the aftermath of our character saying these words? In other words, how impactful was the ideal to the actual story? I also reached out to the Stormlight Archive subreddit to see what the rest of the fanbase thought, or at least a small portion of it, and that helped play into the final results for this ranking. Anyways, that is more than enough of an introduction. Let's get started. Starting at the bottom at number 17 is Shallan's first truth, or second ideal, as a Lightweaver. While this one is at the bottom, I don't dislike it. I actually think there's something quite cool about it, that being that I didn't even realize that this was a truth for her until someone pointed it out to me. I had missed this as a truth during both of my read-throughs for The Way of Kings. But sure enough, I went back and read the excerpt, and it is clear that this was indeed Shallan's first truth that we at least saw her speak in the series. She was hearing voices and seeing figures, which ended up being the cryptic spren, I believe, and they asked her what she is, and she responded with, "I am terrified." Then she was transported to Shadesmar for the first time and quite easily and accidentally does her first soul casting. And she also hears a voice say, "That is true." So it checks all the boxes, but at the end of the day, the truth itself just isn't epic or shocking. It doesn't really elevate the text all that much either. It does contribute to Shallan's arc, but it does so quite cryptically. I do think that Shallan's truths definitely get more interesting as the story develops with her, but this is easily the least exciting of them all. Next up at number 16 is Seth's second ideal as a Skybreaker, which is, "I swear to seek justice and to let it guide me until I find a more perfect ideal." After saying this, Key says his words are accepted and takes him as her squire. There's a nice soft and sweet moment after this exchange where Seth relishes in breathing in Stormlight again and taking to the skies. You definitely feel for Seth as he has been this assassin slave for a large chunk of his life, but now he's starting to redeem himself on this better path. It's a nice moment and the words are more meaningful here, but again, it's nothing extraordinary compared to the rest. Which leads me to number 15, Seth's fourth ideal. I think this one is pretty cool. Seth's backstory is of high interest to me, and I can't wait to visit the Shin in Book 5, but after progressing as a Skybreaker, swearing to seek justice and to follow Dalinar, Seth says, "I will cleanse the Shin of their false leaders, so long as Dalinar Kholin agrees." This scene then ends with a bittersweet exchange between Seth and Nail as they part ways to follow their separate quests in pursuing justice. But moving on to number 14, I have the second ideal for our will shaper, Venli. Originally, I did have this one at number 15, but it got enough votes from the subreddit to move it up here at number 14. In this ideal, Venli swears, "I will seek freedom for those in bondage." And of these bottom 4 so far, I think this is definitely the most inspiring ideal. However, it clearly didn't inspire Venli all that much, because she says it right after seeing Lift, a child, trapped in a cage and not helping her escape. She was on her way there and she wanted to help, but she didn't charge in like Kaladin would do. Fortunately, she does find her courage in the final parts of Rhythm of War. She seeks out the listeners and tries to help her mother, and in the end, her words are accepted, assumingly by cultivation, but correct me if I'm wrong there. The reason I have this one lower on my list than some of you might have it on yours is because I didn't really see the logic in cultivation accepting the words when she did in the book. It's not like Venli did something relevant to her ideal, seeking freedom for those in bondage. So I think that little disconnect there hindered it a bit for me. Coming in at number 13 is the second ideal for Dalinar the Bondsmith, which is, "I will unite instead of divide. I will bring men together." Dalinar says this after a very epic and climactic battle towards the end of Words of Radiance, and the Stormfather, which is one of 3 special Spren, reluctantly accepts the words and bonds with Dalinar. There aren't any huge repercussions here, but it is a nice, funny scene. The Stormfather, he kind of reminds me of Jeff Dunham's Walter. He's just a grouchy old man in a lot of ways, so pairing Dalinar with him is kind of hilarious karma. I do think this ideal was an awesome way to not wrap up, but enhance the 2-book long arc for Dalinar to unite. But again, the ones above this I find more interesting. Which brings us to number 12, the third ideal for Lift, our little edge dancer. Lift is a very controversial character within the Stormlight community. Some people love her, and some people detest her as a super annoying character. I am of the former. I love her. I love her sarcasm and the childish energy she brings to the cast of characters. I love her relationship with her Spren Wendell, and I think her ideals are really inspiring. In this third ideal, she says, "I will listen to those who have been ignored." In the novella Edge Dancer, Lift had figured out that Stump was the person using surges in Yada to heal people. However, Stump got a really bad rap. But in the end, it was Lift who gave her the light of day and a voice to drop all the charges against her. I find the words themselves very inspiring, and they certainly elevate the story and push Lift to be better as well, which is the entire point of the words and being a Radiant. However, as far as epicness or interest goes with the Aftermath, it's a tad weaker. Coming in at number 11 is the first ideal for every Knight's Radiant. We've seen most of the main Radiant characters say these words on the page, and some of them vary from very awesome to okay, but overall, I love this ideal. It's inspiring to me and definitely the rest of the community, and there are some epic moments within this series utilizing these words, the obvious one being Navani. But it's also just a good motto for life that can be interpreted in many different ways. Life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. Moving on to number 10 is the third ideal for Seth. I thought this was a great moment in Oathbringer where Seth realizes he had been duped by the Shin. He was never truthless and the Oathstone was a sham. He always had a choice. He was just following the wrong people. And he realized he needed to set his heart upon the guidance of the right people. And so he swears to follow the will of Dalinar Kholin. The words aren't all that inspiring, but they're extremely indicative of this huge shift for our assassin in white, and they help solidify his redemption arc. And as you guys know, I'm a huge sucker for redemption arcs. But ahead of it at number 9 is the second spoken truth for Shallan, where she says, "I am a murderer, I killed my father." For me, reading The Way of Kings, this was a huge twist that really told me a lot about her character. It was a very powerful truth that built off of the first one and led to Yasna discovering what she is and taking her on as a true ward. It also got me much more interested in Shallan's character after a rather slow start for her in book 1. So I think this ideal did everything it set out to do, which is why I have it here on my list. It would be higher if I was able to connect to it more personally, but nonetheless, it is a solid ideal. Coming in at number 8 is the second ideal for Lift. And just to note, this is the second ideal that moved up due to the input I got from Reddit. As for the rest of them, it seemed like we were all in agreement. Similar to Liv's third ideal, this one is very emotional and moving. I like the ideal itself a bit more personally, and I found the ending to the interlude where she says these words very heartwarming, as the words allow her to power up and save Gox from dying by using her regrowth surge. It's a sweet ending to a Liv story, it elevated her character, and it got me invested in her. But next up at number 7 is the third ideal for the Lopin. Lopin says this at the very end of the novella Dawnshard, and I definitely didn't cry, okay? I didn't cry at all. But in all seriousness, this was a very touching and funny scene where Lopin says, I've got to protect people, you know? Even from myself. I think this really opened up the third ideal of the Windrunners after seeing Kaladin and Teft swear it. The third ideal is all about not letting hate get in the way of protecting people, and seeing as Lopin doesn't really hate anybody, I thought Brandon's use of the ideal to expand on the Windrunner lore a bit and progress Lopin's character as this sarcastic teaser was just really well done. I personally related to this ideal probably more than any other specific ideal because I oftentimes act like Lopin and use funny little teases and jokes to show my love to people. So I took these words and the lesson to heart. Moving on to number 6 is the third ideal for Kaladin Stormblessed. This is a huge moment in the series for one of the most beloved characters that displays yet another massive power-up for the Radiants, with Kaladin getting a Shard Blade, or a Shard Spear as he prefers. At this point in the story, Kaladin has struggled with the idea of protecting Elhokar, who holds much of the blame for Tien dying. Kaladin had decided to take the dark path and seek revenge, and in doing so lost Syl as his honor spren. So when he decides in the end that it's right to protect Elhokar, and he finally says the words, I will protect even those I hate, so long as it is right, Syl reclaims him and appears as a Shard Blade, and my jaws dropped. It's just such an epic moment that remains satisfying upon rereads, fulfilling yet another emotional arc for Kaladin, plus the battles that take place after him saying these words are nothing short of legendary. Kicking off the top 5 is the third and most recent truth for Shallan. I killed her. I killed my spren. This was a huge revelation for Shallan, one that a lot of us did not see coming. I know some people theorized about this, but for me, this was a shocking twist that really pumped me up during her story's climax in Rhythm of War. It was also such a beautiful moment of Shallan finally coming to terms with this truth and allowing herself to move on, even though she is taking back the painful memories that she had repressed for so long. After saying these words, there's a short moment where Shallan creates a Stormlight reproduction of the scene where she killed Testament, her spren before pattern, and that was very touching and satisfying for her character arc. While the immediate aftermath pales in comparison to most other ideals, this one brings up a lot of big questions for Shallan and Radiance and the Cosmere, and it sets up her character's trajectory very well. But moving on to number 4, I have the third ideal for Teft. His version of the ideal is, I will protect those I hate, even if the one I hate most is myself. Teft had been struggling with his addiction to fire moss, thus putting him down a dark path of loss and regret. Similarly to Kaladin, Teft blames himself for misfortunes around him and believes he doesn't deserve to live, he doesn't deserve his spren, Fenderana. He also doesn't believe he can become a better person, that is until Fenderana reminds him that that is what the words are all about. And so when he finally decides to buck up and say those words, it's easily one of the most thrilling and emotional moments in the entire series. And seeing him appear in the Battle of Thaylen Field from Renarin's perspective is easily one of the most memorable and epic moments. But taking the number 3 spot ahead of it is the second ideal of the Windrunners, first spoken by Kaladin. I think this one speaks for itself. This is, for many readers, the moment that we realized this series was going to be something special. At this point in the Way of Kings, Dalinar had been betrayed by Sadeas and left on the battlefield to die, surrounded by Parshendi. Kaladin decides that they need to go back in and help them, and after a brief beating and being urged to say the words, he's surprised to find that he already knows what they are, despite never having been told them before. I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. I think Brando Sando's decision to switch to Teft and Moash's point of view after this moment was genius. I mean, it had been, what, thousands of years since people had last seen Radiance? And so seeing them return with Kaladin from someone else's perspective was just so chilling and epic. It rattles your bones, it ignites your enthusiasm, and it hypes you up for the last part of that book. Moving on to number 2 is the last and most recent ideal for Kaladin, the 4th ideal where he accepts that there will be those he cannot save. This is by far the biggest arc for Kaladin in the series. He always blames himself for those who die around him, and he's just unwilling to accept that he's saved so many people and he should focus on that triumph rather than beat himself up over something that's outside of his limitations. I think Wit deserves a lot of credit for helping him get there with the dog and the dragon story, but seeing Dalinar throw Kaladin into this vision to revisit Tien after Kaladin had thrown himself off of Urithiru, and reading Kaladin's acceptance of this lesson, it was just so heartwarming and thrilling. I definitely bawled my eyes out, and I have gone back to read that excerpt to bawl my eyes out some more because it's just so awesome. If there's anything to worry about regarding the Stormlight archive, it is whether Brandon can top this, along with my number 1. Which brings us to my favorite ideal, along with many others, the 3rd ideal for Dalinar Kholin. While Kaladin might be the golden boy of the series, Dalinar remains to be the best written character I have ever come across, and his arc of regret and pain is something I'll never forget. Dalinar is forced to come to terms with his recovering memories regarding the loss of his wife and his visit to the Night Watcher, and during the Battle of Thaylen Field, Dalinar resists Amaram and Odium, and he finally says these words, "I will take responsibility for what I have done. If I must fall, I will rise each time a better man." And as if that isn't one of my favorite quotes of all time, Dalinar continues this epic moment by plunging his 2 fists into the cognitive realm and the spiritual realm and smashing them together, reopening Honor's perpendicularity and finally saving Kaladin for once. It's easily the coolest moment in the series to date for me, helping make this ideal my favorite above all else. Well, that's my list. Don't forget to share yours down in the comments below. These types of niche videos are most fun when people are engaging and sharing their list so that we can have a conversation about it. And I'm really curious what other readers have to say, what their favorite ideals are, and what moments stood out to them in the series. Anyways, I've definitely talked for long enough. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next time.